Uh, Thank you. Thank you, Gitanjali, for that welcome. Thank you all for coming here. I'm really very happy to be back at JNU, and I thought I'd begin on a somewhat autobiographical note. I was never formally a student of JNU. I was a student of the university in the other side of Delhi, the older university, Delhi University. So I did my BA and MA there. But many of my friends came here for the MA. Now I carried on, I did a BA in economics, and I carried on for an MA in Delhi University, mostly so that I could play cricket for my college. I mean, I had played cricket in my BA, and for all other JNUs, I mean, JNU already then was acquiring a reputation for cutting-edge scholarship, intellectual debate, creativity, but it had no sports culture. So I would have had to give up my cricket career to come here. So I carried on for an MA. And in the course of my MA, I discovered an interest in sociology. I was a student of economics. And as you know, in the Indian university system, it's kind of a very conventional system where you can't shift subjects easily. So after my MA, I had to go somewhere else to do a PhD in sociology. And it was very difficult for me to get admission anywhere. And the only place that gave me admission, rather strangely, was the Indian Institute of Management in Calcutta, which had a small sociology program. And for whatever reason, they gave me admission. And I went there blind. And in a management institute, sociology was utterly marginal. You know, it was a discipline no one was interested in because they had no prestige, no money, and because people joined management institutes to become rich and to become wealthy, to do finance and marketing and operations and such. And here I was a kind of misfit in the hostel because everyone else, you know, had a different kinds of ambition. Now there was another misfit there who was a product of JNU, who was a young lecturer in the sociology department called Anjan Ghosh. Anjan Ghosh was a student in one of the first batches JNU sociology. He would have joined in, I think, 71 or 72. He did his MA here, he topped the university, then he did an MPhil. And he was doing his PhD when his father died. So he had to go back to be with his mother in Kolkata, and he got a job in IIM. So he was in an institute, unlike he had come from JNU where he was a brilliant sociology student, where he had great teachers, there was an interdisciplinary faculty, he knew people in history, in political science, in economics, he was active in student politics, he was a member of a group then called Free Thinkers, I don't know whether Free Thinkers still exists, but he was a brilliant person, and I'm speaking of him in the past tense since he's no longer alive. And he joined this management institute that I came as a PhD student. And immediately, we became very close friends because he was my teacher, but he was only a few years older than me. He was missing the culture of Delhi and JNU, and when he saw an enthusiastic, keen student wanting to discover sociology and scholarship, he found a kind of at least he had me. He didn't have JNU and 50 PhD students, but he had at least one young boy who was very keen to learn, and I had him. I mean, Anjan was my mentor. I mean, Anjan died of cancer about 15 years ago, but without him, all the kind words that Gitanjali said about me, and some of you know I'm a writer of books, I would not have written a single book without Anjan Ghosh. Anjan Ghosh, in a sense you could say, I am an indirect product of JNU. Because my teacher was from JNU. The person who taught me everything was from JNU. And he was an extraordinary person. Before I come to Gandhi and Ambedkar, I'll talk about Gandhi and Ambedkar. I know that's the main object of my talk. But since I'm in Anjan's alma mater, and Anjan is tragically dead, and I owe so much to him, let me tell you a few things I learned from Anjan. As I said, I was 22, he was 27 or 28. So there was not much of an age. I was a student, he was my teacher. But every day he would come to the hostel in the bus, and I would meet him. He would come to the campus, I would have chai with him, then we would have class, then he would go to another class, I would go to the library, then I would have chai with him before he went back. So it was a very special relationship. And he took me through the entire classics of sociology. So whether it's Marx, Weber, Durkheim, the great works of Indian anthropologists, Veena Das, M.N. Srinivas, Andre Bhete, मैं कहूँगा हिंदी में मार मार के मुझे सोशियोलॉजी पढ़ाया because I had never studied sociology in my life. I just had an interest. I said economics is not for me. I want to do a PhD in sociology because it's more humanistic. It's not about numbers and equations, and it's more congenial to my temperament. And I landed up in this place, not knowing who I'd meet there, and here was Anjan. So he had an extraordinary interdisciplinary perspective. So his first degree was in English literature. So he was very interested in good writing, that scholars must write clearly. Scholars must not use excessive jargon. They must communicate with the ordinary citizen, not just with other academics. So that's the other thing he taught me. Then he had an interest in history. He wrote the first reviews of subaltern studies. I was a student in the early 80s when subaltern studies was being published, and he wrote some of the first reviews. And he told me, disregard disciplinary boundaries. In a university department, there are these tribal differences. A sociologist will not talk to a political scientist, who will not talk to a historian, who will not talk to an anthropologist. He got me interested in history. I moved from sociology to history, really because of Anjan Ghosh. He taught me how to use the archives, what it meant to do fieldwork. And then he taught me other lessons. One of the lessons he taught me, which has stood me in good stead all my life. He said, always distinguish between a scholar's work and their personality. There will be scholars who are total assholes, who are horrible human beings, but their scholarship is actually good. So don't be friends with them, don't go for a drink with them, but you may want to learn from their work. On the other hand, there may be scholars who are very decent, good people, but their scholarship is secondary. And always distinguish between the person and the scholar. Now this is, that's one thing he taught me. The other thing he taught me was that there's life outside scholarship. So I had an interest in cricket, which Anjan did not share, but Anjan introduced me to film. Now, as social scientists, we deal with the word, we don't deal with images. But the film is the great artistic invention, human invention of the 20th century, which includes the cinema, of course, and also the still photography. But earlier centuries had given us art, literature, and music, but it's the 20th century that gave us the film. So Anjan made me a member of a film club, where we would go, and Calcutta had at least then a very interesting social culture. It was not like Delhi, which is, there's a Khan market gang, and then there's people who are, from a working class or subaltern background, they never mix. Delhi has a very class-oriented society. Now, in Calcutta, a film club would have a university professor, a lawyer, a clerk, a trade union activist, all in that film club, watching, not just great Bengali filmmakers like Ray and Khattak and Sen, but also great European filmmakers, Godard, Truffaut, Kurosawa, the great Japanese master. Yes, Anjan opened my eyes to all of this, to the world outside scholarship, the world of film, and what great films can tell you about the human condition, about history, about sociology, about culture, about language, which you won't find in the library. So, I'm very happy I can speak a great deal more about Anjan. Sadly, he died of cancer. My next book is dedicated to Anjan. I already dedicated a book to Anjan 20 years ago when he was alive, and he saw that. My next book is a book about Gandhi and debates around Gandhi. And it is going to be dedicated to Anjan, because my first debates I had about Gandhi were with Anjan. Now, Anjan and I told you, I learned a great deal from him. And he was, as I said, without him, I would not be speaking in front of you here today. I would have not written a single book without this extraordinary product of JNU, Anjan Ghosh. However, we had our disagreements. One of the disagreements was that he was a Marxist. And I was not anti-Marxist, but I was much more sympathetic to Gandhi. And in those days, the most savage criticisms of Gandhi came from the left. Now, this may surprise some of the young people here, because now the criticisms of Gandhi come from the right, from other. But in those days, it was the left that really detested Gandhi, the Marxist left. And above all, the Naxalite left. And Kolkata was very active, even then in the 80s, the Naxalites were very active. And in 1969, which is when Anjan was a student, he attended, as he told me, as a young idealistic leftist, he attended the founding meeting of the CPI-ML in the Calcutta Maidan. Now, I had really, as I said, little time for Marxism, but I was very interested in Gandhi. And the Naxalites, it is, if you look at the left wing, the Marxist critique of Gandhi is quite interesting. So the CPI and CPM were ambivalent about Gandhi. He mobilized people in the anti-imperial struggle, but ultimately he was a capitalist lackey. He was a Tony of Birla and Tata, and he was a capitalist lackey. That was the kind of CPM position. The Naxalite position was Gandhi was an active enemy of the revolution. And in 1969, which was the year the CPI, the Naxalites first formed a political party, was also the year of the Gandhi centenary. You remember? Now, one of the things the Naxalites did was as to show both their commitment to revolution and their hatred for what they called bourgeois politics. They would go around Bengal and Andhra and Bihar, wherever they were politically had some political influence, decapitating statues of Gandhi, beheading statues of Gandhi. And in one year alone, 1969, there were more than 250 beheadings of Gandhi's of statues to show the hatred. Right. Now, so Arjun and I disagreed about this. Of course, he had mellowed his views, but when we were talking, one day I was telling him about how I felt Marxist and misinterpreted Gandhi. And he would really debate and discuss and open his mind. So, what Anjan of JNU taught me, as I said, one of the reasons I was very happy when I got the invitation from my friends here a couple of weeks ago to come and speak here, is so happened I'm in Delhi this week, so it was easy to arrange, was that I wanted to pay this tribute to how indirectly you could say I'm a student and product of JNU. My degrees are from somewhere else. Not probably, it's nowhere on my CV that JNU influenced me in any way. But I would not be here before you today. I would not have written a single book had I not been taught by one of the finest products of JNU. So thank you very much for asking. Now, let me come to the theme of my lecture. You've already heard the title. I've called it, Must We See Gandhi and Ambedkar as Rivals and Adversaries? And I'm going to start with Gandhi. I will not say much about Ambedkar, because I think, except to say this, that Ambedkar was a truly extraordinary figure, a person of many parts, a lawyer, an economist, a religious and social theorist, a Confucianist. Over the years I've studied Gandhi and Ambedkar, which is from the last 30 years. As I said, I've been interested in Gandhi all my life as a scholar. My PhD thesis was on the Chipko movement, which was a grassroots Gandhian environmental movement. That was my PhD thesis. So Gandhian activists greatly inspired me. People like Chandri Prasad Bhatt, Sundarlal Bahuguna, later Medha Patkar. Ambedkar entered my life a little later, in the 1990s, when I read Annihilation of Caste for the first time, and it made a profound impression on me. I mean, it's as you know, a 60-page pamphlet, but it carries the power and insight and originality of a 600-page book. I mean, what Ambedkar says in those 60 pages is of timeless relevance, and so precisely and sharply and directly articulated. And ever since I have been, you could say, trying to find a way of drawing on Gandhi and Ambedkar. And I belong to that group of thinkers. I'm not alone, I'll quote some people later in my talk, who argue that the rivalry between Gandhi and Ambedkar that is there in popular discourse today is misplaced. Of course, they disagreed in their lifetime. You know, we know the debates about the Pune Pact and then about affirmative action, whether you have separate electorates or a joint electorate. We know that eventually Gandhi threatened to go on a fast unto death, and Ambedkar was felt coerced, and then the Pune Pact was signed, and then Ambedkar rejected the Pune Pact, started his own political party, and the independent Labour parties, and fought the elections of 1937 against the Congress. We know that during the war, when the Quit India movement happened, Gandhi and Ambedkar were on opposite sides. Ambedkar was in the Viceroy's Executive Council, Gandhi was in the Quit India movement. We also know that after the war, there was a period of reconciliation when Ambedkar joined the government. But overall, in popular discourse, they tend to be seen as rivals and adversaries from both sides. From the Gandhian side, the critique is that Ambedkar collaborated with the British. In fact, there were attacks on Ambedkar by some of Gandhi's followers, not by Gandhi himself. In fact, if you read Gandhi's writings on Ambedkar, they are marked by intellectual disagreement, and I come to some intellectual disagreements. So Gandhi disagreed with Ambedkar on a few things, but they are also marked by enormous personal regard. Gandhi says that the treatment that Ambedkar has, when one of his colleagues says Ambedkar is using bitter and angry language about you and the Congress party, Gandhi says his language, he has suffered so much because of his status. It's a mark of his esteem that it does not break our heads. But they have these disagreements. So as I said, while Gandhi and Ambedkar were alive, and even after that, in the 50s and the 60s, when the Congress was in power all across India, in the central states, Ambedkar was a kind of marginal figure, except for the few years when he helped the drafting of the Constitution. He was regarded as being an unreliable patriot because he had, according to the Congress, he had collaborated with the British. So that was the kind of, when I was young, Ambedkar was not very visible in the nationalist consciousness. Later on, there was an Ambedkar revival, starting with the Dalit Panther movement in the 1970s, and of course social movements in which Dalits became much more active, mobilized, self-aware, self-confident, and they turned to Ambedkar as their icon and their inspiration, because he was without question the most extraordinary leader that had been produced, who had been born in a disadvantaged background. If you compare Ambedkar with other figures of the national movement, Tagore, Gandhi, Nehru, Bose, all upper caste and upper class, all privileged people. I mean, Ambedkar had to earn everything through his own struggle, his own intelligence and his own energy. So one can see why Ambedkar became an icon. And why he was, who inspired particularly Dalits, but not only Dalits, other people of disadvantaged backgrounds to collectively organize and to find a place for themselves in the Indian political and social order. But this admiration of Ambedkar, this adulation of Ambedkar was often accompanied by anger towards Gandhi. A sense that Gandhi had patronized Ambedkar, that Gandhi had been condescending towards Ambedkar. And sometimes, the hatred and anger towards Gandhi that some Dalit intellectuals and ideologues articulated was as intense as the hatred and anger that the Naxalites of my youth had articulated, and that now we see among some right-wing opponents of Gandhi. And it has always struck me that this polarization is problematic and unhelpful. It's unhelpful for those of us who want a fairer, more just, more inclusive, egalitarian, more democratic India. And in my... can you all hear me on the back? Can you all hear me? Or you want me to hear? Is it okay? Can you? Yeah, okay. So I thought I've always wanted to, you could say, just as back in the 80s, I was trying to persuade my Marxist friends to pay more respect to Gandhi, when I was a young man in my 20s and my 30s. Now that I'm an old man in my 60s, my plea is towards my Dalit friends to see Gandhi in a more sympathetic light. And that's really what my talk today is going to be about. And I'll begin with Gandhi's own struggle against untouchability. And then I'll move from there. Died almost 70 years ago. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about Gandhi's life in South Africa first, and then I'll come to Gandhi's life in India. Now, I have written a 2-volume biography of Gandhi, Gandhi Before India, which deals with his years from 1869, his birth and upbringing in Gujarat, his education in London, and the 2 decades in South Africa. And the second volume, Gandhi, the Years That Changed the World, is about his years in India. Now, while Gandhi was in South Africa, there were 3 or 4 core elements of his philosophy that he developed there, which he carried on to his work in India. The first was an absolute commitment to non-violence, that we will struggle against injustice, but we will not do it through the force of arms, because violence breeds more violence. So that is one aspect of what Gandhi was committed to. The second is his absolute commitment to Hindu-Muslim harmony and to the belief that India is not a land of Hindus alone, nor is it a land of Hindus primarily, as some of his contemporaries believe, and as of course, as many people today think that India is essentially a Hindu Rashtra or should become a Hindu Rashtra. Now, if you look at Gandhi's life in South Africa, he is born, his first client is a Muslim. He goes there to settle a dispute between 2 Muslim businessmen. He stays in the home. He goes in 1893 and he spends the night in the home of Dada Abdullah. Now, this would be inconceivable in India at that time, that a Hindu would stay in a Muslim home or a Muslim would stay in a Hindu home. His first funder, when he starts his first organization, the Natal Indian Congress, the first person to give money is a Parsi called Rustamji. Then the struggle happens, and in that struggle, the most radical satyagrahi, the person who goes to jail repeatedly, is a Muslim called A.M. Kachalia. And incidentally, this is part of the long influence of Gandhi on the history of the world, not just of India. A.M. Kachalia's son, long after Gandhi died, and returned to India and died, A.M. Kachalia's sons were close colleagues of Nelson Mandela and the anti-apartheid struggle. 2 of Kachalia's sons, Yusuf and Maulvi Kachalia. All this is documented. So Gandhi, the commitment to non-violence, the commitment to Hindu-Muslim harmony, and thirdly, the commitment to the idea that India is a land not just of many religions, but of many languages. You know, Gandhi was a great writer in Gujarati, but he was not a Gujarati chauvinist. He did not believe Hindus are superior to Muslims, nor did he believe that Gujaratis are superior to other cultures in India. And some of his closest collaborators were Tamils, because the Tamil working class was abundantly represented in South Africa. And when Gandhi started his magazine, Indian Opinion, he started a weekly. He was also to promote his political cause. He started, as many activists do, he started a magazine called Indian Opinion. And Indian Opinion was printed in 4 languages: Hindi, English, Gujarati and Tamil. It may have been the first multilingual newspaper in the world. So, what Gandhi learned in South Africa was that India was a land of tremendous heterogeneity, of class, of language, and of religion. And that is the lesson he brought back to India. that when we came back to India to join the Congress Party, he came committed to the idea that India must be inclusive, diverse, and heterogeneous in terms of language and religion especially. And of course, that is what JNU is all about. And that is what India should be all about. However, there was a missing piece in Gandhi's political philosophy. Gandhi had also, by the way, and this is again not very well known. Already in South Africa, Gandhi had started to write about the rights of women. Non-violent satyagraha was actually influenced a fair amount by the suffragettes in England. Gandhi had gone to England in 1906 and 1909 and seen English women demand the vote, and we put their bodies forward in protest, but the police would beat them because English men did not want to give women the vote. In South Africa, several Indian women, including Kasturba, went to jail. Now we're talking about 1930. A deeply conservative society, men and women were never together in India. Women also went to jail. So Gandhi had already developed in South Africa all these progressive ideas about religious pluralism, linguistic pluralism, and at least some elements, not full gender equality. There were ways in which he was still a patriarch, but at least that women also had a sense of agency and could contribute to social and public life. But there was a blind spot. In Gandhi's South African years, he had little understanding of caste. And why is that? In the diaspora, generally caste is less visible. It's in the Indian rural context where it's very clear where the Brahmins live, where the Kshatriyas live, where the Vaishyas live, where the OBCs live, and where the Dalits live. So Gandhi was largely ignorant of caste. However, he had a colleague in South Africa who was a Dalit Christian called Vincent Lawrence. And when Gandhi left for India after 20 years in South Africa, there's a letter quoted in my book, one by Vincent Lawrence and one by another Dalit Christian called Lazarus, who wrote to Gandhi saying, when you go back and join the national movement in India, you will find that the Congress is dominated by Brahmins. It says it is fighting for independence and freedom for India, but you will find that it is really upper castes who are leading the fight for freedom, and what about those who are of disadvantaged caste backgrounds? So Gandhi's antenna goes up, because in South Africa he wasn't really very concerned with caste. He comes back to India, and his first travels are in South India, because the Tamils had played such an important role in his satyagraha. He wants to thank them. So he travels around South India, and in his first lectures, he finds that in a group like this, the Dalits are like far away. They can't sit. They have to stand to the side. And he asks, what is happening? And he says, no, they are, the word in Tamil Nadu was Panchama, which is a word used in South India for Dalits was Panchama, literally of the fifth order, outside the caste system. The caste system is four varnas. Panchama, outside the caste system. So he gets more aware of caste. He brings in the Dalit family in his ashram in Ahmedabad. That angers the founders. They withdraw. So he is aware. He is aware that this is a real stigma on Indian society. And it's not just a stigma on Indian society, it's a challenge for the Indian freedom struggle. How can you ask for freedom from the white ruler, from the British, when a section of your own society is unfree? And all of you know about the Jallianwala Bagh massacre of 1919. And you know that the order to fire on the troops was that of a British general called Dyer, Reginald Dyer. Right, you know all that. But what I suspect very few among you know is that after the Jallianwala massacre, Gandhi started his non-cooperation movement. And in that non-cooperation movement in 1920, Gandhi said, we will be fit for Swaraj only when we abolish untouchability. And he also said, the Hindus who practice untouchability are the Dyers of Hinduism. They are like General Dyer. It is diarism among Hindus. That's the language Gandhi uses. So, over the course of his life in India, from 1915 to 1947, again, this is something I have documented in great detail in my biography, so I'm only going to summarize it here. Over the course of his life, Gandhi becomes more and more critical of the pernicious, horrible practice of untouchability. And his views become more and more radical. You know, one of the things about Gandhi is because there are 97 volumes of his works. You can always selectively quote something and say, this is Gandhi. You know, you can quote his views on, you can quote out of context one line and claim that he defends violence. You can quote something he said in 1990 defending Varnashtra Dharma and not quote what he said after that and say Gandhi defends Varnashtra Dharma. But actually, if you look at Gandhi's attitude towards caste and untouchability over the long period, you can clearly see that there's a gradual radicalization of his views. So, right from the beginning, he says untouchability is bad. Those who practice untouchability are the dyers of Hinduism. He said this in 1990. But he doesn't go beyond that. He does not advocate interdining and intermarriage. He says, okay, maybe there is some logic to Varnashra Dharma, but every caste is equal. It's not hierarchy. It's not Brahmins are superior to Kshatriyas, etc. It's a kind of a vertical order, and you practice your parent profession. And of course, untouchability is awful. It is like slavery, but you know, in your house you don't have to practice interdining, intermixing. So the first step in Gandhi's views, which is from about 1915 when he comes back to 1924, is untouchability is bad and horrible, and Swaraj will only come when we abolish untouchability, but nothing else. The second step happens where he says we also must promote interdining and intermingling. You know, in the caste system, is defined by the whole idea of pollution. That a Brahmin cannot accept water or food from someone from a lower caste. So he says, no, in the ashram everyone will, people of all castes will eat, live together, do the chores of cooking, cleaning. And then he also starts advocating temple entry. That, you know, in temples, Dalits were not allowed at all. And Gandhi says there must be equality in the eyes of God. So every worshipper, just as in a mosque, every Muslim can go in regardless of caste, so there may be a gender distinction. In a church, every Christian can go in. In a temple, why should Dalits be kept out? So the second step in Gandhi's views is to say untouchability is of course bad, but there must also be bhayachari, fraternization, intermixing of people with different castes. And then the third step is to advocate intermarriage as well. You know, the most radical step, which of course Ambedkar advocates in annihilation of caste, is intermarriage. Marry a boy of one caste marrying a girl of another caste. And in his own ashram, in Sevagram, Gandhi often himself presided over intercaste marriages, particularly between Dalits and Subarnas. So if you trace Gandhi's views over the course of his life, he is progressively becoming more radical. Now, he is becoming more radical partly because of Ambedkar's challenge, and partly because of the challenge of a very great Malayali social reformer, Narayana Guru, who actually Gandhi meets before he meets Ambedkar. Gandhi meets Narayana Guru in 1925 during the Vaikom Satyagraha, whose centenary we are now celebrating in this year. And there may be some people here from Kerala who know about Narayana Guru, who said who refused to distinguish between caste or religion. He said, one humanity, one caste, one God, one religion. So, and that is part of Gandhi's openness. That if he meets someone who takes him towards a more progressive, more inclusive, more egalitarian point of view, he's willing to listen to them and to learn from them. So it's from the women protesters in England, the suffragettes, that Gandhi learns about gender equality. and from Narayana Guru, and then from Ambedkar, Gandhi becomes more direct, more confrontational in his attitude towards caste. Now, why did Gandhi move slowly? Why did Gandhi in 1919 not say, I must promote intermarriage? You must understand that. It's because Gandhi was battling against the orthodoxy of Hinduism. The Shankaracharyas, the high priests of Hinduism, were all total defenders of the caste system and practitioners of untouchability. And they were horrified by Gandhi, who was not a Brahmin, who did not know Sanskrit. How dare he challenge our practice? How dare he say Hindus should oppose untouchability, whereas scriptures sanction untouchability? And who is he? He doesn't know Sanskrit, he is not a priest, he is not ordained. And the Shankaracharyas were the most hostile opponents of Gandhi. In 1933-34, Gandhi went on an all-India tour against the practice of untouchability. And on that tour, there were attacks on his life by right-wing Hindus associated with the Hindu massacre. So Gandhi, to understand why Gandhi was going incrementally at his stages, one aspect of that is, of course, Gandhi was fighting many battles. He was fighting the battle for political freedom. He was fighting the battle for non-violent. Battle is the wrong analogy. Gandhi was conducting many campaigns. There was a campaign for political freedom against European, to free India from European colonialism. There was a struggle for Hindu-Muslim harmony. There was a struggle for respect for states' rights and federalism and minority languages. There was a struggle for gender equality, and there was a struggle of untouchability. So, his campaign against untouchability was part of a larger campaign of struggles that he was conducting. So, Ambedkar thought he was not giving it enough attention. But the Shankaracharyas thought he was giving it too much attention. And even in the Congress party, no leader of the Congress party, except one or two, except Rajagopalachari of Tamil Nadu, supported Gandhi's campaign against untouchability. Nehru, Bose, Patel, you name Kripalani, Rajendra Prasad, you name all the icons of the freedom struggle. They said, why are you diverting your energies in asking for Dalits to enter temples, making Dalits part of your Ashram community, calling upper caste Hindus the dyers of Hinduism? Let's fight for political freedom. That's the most important thing. So, the paradox of Gandhi's position was that the upper caste Hindus said, how dare you challenge our predecessors? And they thought Gandhi was a dangerous radical. But on the other side, Ambedkar thought he was going too slow. He said, why is the Mahatma not more direct, more frontal, more thoroughgoing in his attack on untouchability? So that is why you see that Gandhi and Ambedkar, that is the, you could say that paradox of Gandhi's position. Now, of course, there were some differences between Gandhi and Ambedkar, and I'll come to them now. Essentially, there are three philosophical stroke ideological differences between Gandhi and Ambedkar where it comes to the question of the abolition of inequality within the caste system. The first difference has to do with their attitude towards Hinduism. Gandhi often called untouchability a sin, the practice of untouchability a sin. And he urged Hindus, his fellow Hindus, of purging themselves of this sin. And you could say Gandhi wanted to save Hinduism by eliminating untouchability. That was his hope and his ambition. On the other hand, Ambedkar felt there is no solace, no escape, no emancipation for the Dalit within the Hindu social order. That the Hindu social order is intrinsically exploitative and discriminatory. So the only hope for the Dalit is to leave Hinduism. And it's actually quite fascinating because Ambedkar decides in 1935 that I was born, he makes a famous statement, I was born a Hindu but I will not die a Hindu. But he only converts 21 years later. Now, just as Gandhi had many campaigns, Ambedkar also had many campaigns. And he considered many options. He briefly considered Sikhism, then Islam, then Christianity. And finally he settled on Buddhism. And it's a very open question. And of course he converts on October 15, 1956. 21 years later, after deciding to leave the Hindu fold, he becomes a Buddhist. And tragically he dies 6 weeks later of a heart attack. Now, if Ambedkar had converted in the 1930s, would there have been tens of millions of Dalit Buddhists? We don't know. Anyway, so that's what difference, that's clearly there. That Gandhi held out the hope that Hindus could purge themselves of this sin, that Hindus could reform, Hindus could become more human, and actually realize what damage to their social structure, to their culture, to their religion, this practice of untouchability was doing. Whereas Ambedkar, having suffered discrimination himself, felt that the only hope for the Dalits was to go out. Okay, that's one difference. Second difference is to do with their perspective of economics. So Gandhi believed in a within-centered economy. He felt, and actually some of Gandhi's ideas are very prophetic from an environmental point of view. He saw that the Western model of industrialization would destroy the earth. So he wanted to build India's economy on rural foundations. Whereas Ambedkar was a modernist who believed that you must have large industries, large cities. So there was a difference on economic model. The third difference was that Gandhi worked in the sphere of civil society. He wanted society to change. He wanted individuals to change. Ambedkar felt the state and the law will play the more progressive role in bringing about a change. So there were differences between Gandhi and Ambedkar, but ultimately, this is where I'll make a few remarks and then conclude. They were working towards the same end. They were both interested in making India a fairer, a more inclusive, a more just, a more tolerant, a more humane society. And today, 70 years after their death, should we still see them as rivals and adversaries? Can't we see them as complementary? Ambedkar was the greatest of all Dalit leaders, but Gandhi did more than any other upper caste Hindu to attack and delegitimize untouchable. So today, those of us who are trying to build a fairer, a more just, a more inclusive India, can't we find ways of drawing from both of them? Now, there may be some of us who admire Ambedkar more, and there may be some of us who admire Gandhi more. You know, someone like me, who's a biographer of Gandhi, may have a little more, I admire Ambedkar, but maybe particularly because of Gandhi's emphasis on Hindu-Muslim harmony, and the India of today, where one of the greatest threats to our republic is the vilification of religious minorities. I may have a little more sympathy towards Gandhi, but that does not mean I don't have great admiration for Ambedkar. Similarly, there may be others among us who, for whatever reason, because they come from an intellectual background, because they are Dalits themselves, identify with Ambedkar. But should admiration of Ambedkar be accompanied by suspicion or hatred of Gandhi? Can't we draw on them both? Now, as I said, no upper caste Hindu in the Congress party or in the freedom struggle so directly confronted the problem of untouchability as Gandhi did. And he spent decades grappling with this issue. Now, should that be, at least give him that respect, even if we come from an Ambedkarite point of view? If we come from a Gandhian point of view, should we recognize that the reason Ambedkar sided with the British, because he saw that the Congress party, if it did not reform itself and led the struggle for independence, independence would mean Brahmin Raj. So can't we see the predicament both of them were in and find ways of bringing them together? Now, I live, as you know, in Bangalore. I am not a Kannadiga. I am a domiciled resident of Karnataka. I grew up in Uttarakhand, and if I have a home state, it is Delhi, Uttarakhand. the language, Indian language I'm most comfortable with remains Hindi. But in the 3 decades I've lived in Karnataka, I have interacted very closely with many remarkable Kannadiga intellectuals. And it seems to me that Karnataka is famous for other things. As a speaker in the vanguard or as being a leader in other spheres. We know about the IT revolution, right? And you know that Bangalore is supposed to be the Silicon Valley of India. You know about the great sports persons Karnataka has produced. Not just the cricketers, but also the badminton players, the billiard players, and the athletes and the swimmers, right? But one area in which Karnataka's preeminence is not recognized is the consistent argument of the Dalit Bahujan intellectuals of Karnataka, which are only an argument which I am drawing upon and elaborating in my talk today. The Dalit Bahujan intellectuals of Karnataka have from the 1990s been arguing that we must draw on Ambedkar and Gandhi forth. And the first intellectual who made this argument very persuasively, and I'm going to quote from these intellectuals in the last part of my talk, was a very remarkable social theorist called D.R. Nagaraj, whom I was privileged to know, who, like my teacher Ranjan Ghosh, died young. He died in 1998, but not before publishing a book called The Flaming Feet, which is now available in a new English edition published by Permanent Black. It's a superb book on the Dalit movement in Karnataka. And in that book, Nagaraj argues that we have to bring Gandhi and Ambedkar together. He says, Ambedkar stood for self-respect, for the Dalits to have confidence in their own abilities, their own ideas, their own organizing capacities, as captured in his celebrated slogan, educate, organize, agitate. So self-respect was Ambedkar's path. Self-purification was Gandhi's path. Right, that upper caste Hindus had to purify themselves of this sin of untouchability. So the self-purification of Gandhi sought to make upper caste abandon their arrogance and contempt for those below them in the social hierarchy. The self-respect of Ambedkar was aimed at his fellow Dalits, urging them to claim rights of full and equal citizenship in the Indian Republic. Now, in his book published in the early 90s, The Flaming Feet, went on to say, it was Gandhi who first made the eradication of untouchability a central question in Indian politics, as early as 1919. And today, 100 years later, there is a need to achieve a synthesis of the legacies of Gandhi and Ambedkar. To build a more caring and just society, one needs to awaken the upper caste conscience and to consolidate the upper caste conscience for self-purification and the Dalit conscience for self-respect. So Gandhi and Ambedkar are complementary to one another. That is what D.R. Nagaraj said in the 1990s. Now, D.R. Nagaraj's arguments have been taken forward by his friend Devanur Mahadeva. Is there anyone here from Karnataka in this here? No, I don't see anyone. Yeah. So you might know Devanur Mahadeva, great Dalit writer and intellectual of Mysore, novelist, short story writer, activist. And Devanur Mahadeva has consistently argued that we should not see Ambedkar and Gandhi as rivals. They are colleagues and co-workers. And I'm going to quote what Devanur Mahadeva said in an interview to the Indian Express some years ago. So these are his words. Originally said in Kannada but translated into English. I quote, Mahadeva said, Ambedkar had to awaken the sleeping Dalits and make the journey. Ambedkar had to awaken the sleeping Dalits. Gandhi had to make the effort of correcting and changing the views of those drowned in Hindu caste religion. When you see this, maybe Gandhi could not have traversed so far without Ambedkar. Similarly, without the liberal attitude created by Gandhi, maybe the cruel Savarna society may not have tolerated Ambedkar at all. So both the Savarnas had to change if India has to liberate itself from caste, and those Savarnas have to demand Gandhi. In the fight for Dalit civil rights, Ambedkar is necessary. So Mahadeva says both should be brought together. One last quote from Mahadeva. He said, Gandhi called untouchability a sin. Ambedkar calls it a crime. Why are these opposites? Both are necessary. So that is Mahadeva. And I'm going to quote a last Dalit intellectual from Karnataka, Professor S. Narendra Kumar of Mysore University. Last year, I gave a talk on similar lines to a trade union group in Mysore, similar to the talk I'm giving you today. And Professor S. Narendra Kumar, who is a Dalit intellectual of the university, was the commentator on my talk. And after I ended my talk, he said something absolutely fascinating. He said, what was Gandhi trying to do? He said Gandhi was trying to get upper caste Hindus to overcome their superiority complex, that we are superior to lower caste and untouchables. What was Gandhi trying to do? Get upper caste Hindus to overcome and transcend and conquer their superiority complex. What was Ambedkar trying to do? Try to get Dalits to overcome and transcend their inferiority complex. That because they're born in a Dalit home, they're inferior to upper caste. So these are beautifully complementary. In a sense, I thought that's a perfect way of encapsulating my own arguments. And that is why, in the ongoing struggle against caste discrimination, it's an ongoing struggle. We still have a long road to travel, and we needed, and we still need Ambedkar and Gandhi both. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for such a thorough and valuable discussion. Now I would like to give the mic to the audience. The discussion is open for question and answer session.
Hi, I am Snehasis. I am a student of PhD in sociology. I want to say that for a major part, I disagree with your lecture. And this is Bridging Borders. This lecture is called Bridging Borders between Gandhi and Ambedkar. But I think this is less. It's the platform. But your question was: is Gandhi and Ambedkar rivals, adversaries, or complementary? And the whole lecture was mostly obsessively cleansing the image of Gandhi and less about Ambedkar. Very total less about Ambedkar. And please let me complete in 2-3 points how it is. You said we see Gandhi without context, many of us, that we put Gandhi's quote from 1919 and without context. I think you are also seeing Gandhi without context. How you are putting Gandhi outside the context of his time, that Phule, Periyar, Ambedkar, Bhima Bhoi, and many other anti-caste revolutionaries of his time. You only quoted two. One is Narayan Guru and Ambedkar. But the context is much more bigger. Then why Gandhi is late is cannot be justified why Gandhi was only fighting the Hindus of his time, the Shankaracharyas and all. But the others who were fighting, like Periyar, like Phule, like Bhima Bhoi in Odisha. So this is something out of context. Here I want to quote Ambedkar, that Ambedkar says people go to Gandhi as devotee, see him as Mahatma, but I see him as a naked man. And that's exactly how I understand Gandhi more than anyone else do. And I think that's also a problem with Gandhian scholars. They have obsessed with Gandhi to cleanse his image. They only see him, go to him as devotees, and that's exactly how they cannot see how the whole radical anti-caste movement that was flourishing in Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Odisha and everywhere else, at the time when Gandhi was still conservative. And second, and by this obsession, Gandhian scholars also perpetuate many misinformations. Such as you, when you wrote in 2004 in Reforming the Hindus, you wrote apparently Gandhi recommended Ambedkar's name to the Constituent Assembly. Apparently, you are a historian, how it is apparently? Because the evidences that we have found from Medieval Ambedkar's letter to Ambedkar, it is the ideal constitution maker Mr. Valar who has recommended, not Gandhi. And the last thing, you were speaking about how Gandhi was challenging conservative Hinduism, how Gandhi hoped Hindus could be more human, but at the same time, in a recent social media post, you wrote about how Hinduism was non-aggressive and Hindus learned aggressiveness from the Abrahamic religions. It was a recent social media post. I can produce evidences. But then at the same time he was saying ki it's very much contradictory. Because look at Manusmriti, yes. It is Manusmriti and all that asks to pour, the boiling oil in the ears of untouchables. So Hinduism was never aggressive, never there was an heretic or blasphemy. So it was always there. So please, I think please we should reflect about how the breaching, the question beyond rivals and adversaries, there is an intellectual dishonesty that also with us, the current scholars, that we do not see that what Ambedkar is trying to articulate in 1955 back then.
Thank you. As I said towards the end of my talk, that there may be some of us who admire Gandhi, come from a more immersive, have studied Gandhi more than Ambedkar. But that does not mean to polarize. I mean, if you look at my book, Makers of Modern India, there's a full section on Phule. There are two sections on Ambedkar. My first articles on Ambedkar go back to 1996, and the first time I wrote on Ambedkar was to take apart Arun Shoury's pernicious book on Ambedkar. I don't want to, so I think you are welcome to quote a few things of me here and there. Read my whole work and you will see that I've said many critical things about Gandhi too. And I also said in my talk, among the reasons I think Gandhi is so important today is because one of the major challenges facing this country is the question of Hindu-Muslim harmony and the stigmatization of minorities. But yet I would refuse to yield I refuse to say I cannot admire Ambedkar at the same time. I know that there are people, just as in a different context, I've talked about how Nehru and Patel actually worked together, and there are many forces that would like us to see them as rivals and adversaries. I think if you read the corpus of my work, you will see a great deal about Phule, you will see stuff about other Dalit activists and reformers. If you read my book, Column of Foreign Field, and you see my description of the struggles of the Palwankar brothers. So it's not as if, if you look at I would say that it's a complete misrepresentation of my writings to see me as an apologist for Gandhi and as someone wanting to put down. But forget me. Please read D.R. Nagaraj's work and Devanur Mahadeva's work and make up.
My name is Shaurya. I am a PhD scholar in CPS theory. My question to you is, what do you think about the Gandhi's usage of it of Harijan for because it's not a widely accepted and similarly Divyang is used today for persons with disability, which we do not. What do you think about that?
That's a very good point. I have written about the second volume of my Gandhi biography. That it was unfortunate usage, the usage of Harijan. And at that time, actually Rajagopalachari, who was the only other person, again, in answer to the question that came earlier, Gandhi must be judged against other people in the Congress party. Obviously there's Phule and others who preceded. Rajagopalachari was the only other major Congress leader who recognized the challenge of untouchability. And there's a speech he gave after the roundtable conference where he said Ambedkar's challenge to Gandhi is much more important than the British challenge. And when Gandhi started the Harijan Sevak Sangh, Raja Gopalachari wrote to Gandhi a letter saying this is a problematic name for an organization aiming to eradicate untouchability. Call it the Anti-Untouchability League. And that so happens that there was already an organization called the Anti-Untouchability League. which had been formed by V.R. Shinde, who was an anti-caste activist of Maharashtra in the pre-Ambedkar pre-Ambedkar time. But absolutely, I mean, it's absolutely necessary that the usage of Harijan have to give way to Dalits. You know, it's a product of its time. If you look at, Ambedkar, if you look at African American roots, how Negro gave way to black and to African American. So Harijan, it had willy-nilly a patronizing element to it. Maybe Gandhi did not recognize it. Rajagopalachari told him, anti-untouchability league would be a much more direct, rather than Harijan Sevak Sangh. But for whatever sentimental reasons, partly because, Naseem Mehta, who was a great Gujarati Bhakti poet, had found it. But you're right, that this issue, and it's absolutely, that the term Dalit is now much more widely accepted than Harijan is, I think, only fair and proper.
Namaste sir, my name is Shubham. I am doing PhD at CMS, Center for Media Studies. Sir, there was another Brahmin, upper class Brahmin at the time of Gandhi, was contemporary of Gandhi, who shared a similar disdain as Gandhi about untouchability, and he is regarded also as someone who opened the first temple for untouchables, Savarkar. So I don't have any question, I just want to know his view through the Gandhian lens, sir. Gandhian lens, sir. So the lens you are sharing over here, in the bigger debate of Ambedkar and Gandhi, where do you place Savarkar about his untouchability perspectives and his gender perspectives?
So, you're right that Savarkar, after he came back from the Andamans, started work against caste. He was confined to Ratnagiri. We do not know whether he would have launched an untouchability campaign of the kind Gandhi did, through the 20s and 30s. Savarkar was not progressive on the question of gender. Absolutely not. If you look at the question of gender, it is actually Nehru and Ambedkar who are even more progressive than Gandhi. And of course, there is a major fundamental disagreement between Savarkar and Gandhi on the place of Muslims and Christians in India. Right. So the whole issue, if you look at the recent writing on Savarkar, now how much of his, these are things that have to be studied more carefully. Gandhi's revulsions against untouchability was out of a sense of moral anger and horror. Now, Savarkar's was partly that, but also Hindu consolidation against non-Hindus.